What's up, everybody? Welcome into this trade deadline edition of Pushing the Pile, brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make every moment more. JP, it was an eventful one. Third most trades all time on trade deadline day. That's like as of now. We're having trades come in right to the deadline. I just saw Trevor Penning go to the Chargers, just popped up on the feed. Third most all time. 2022 was the most. 2024, I believe, second most. And then this was the third most. The trade deadline is turning into kind of like the baseball trade deadline where it's, moving day across the NFL, a wild one today.
And it's sort of funny because our CBS colleague, Jonathan Jones, said at the beginning of the day that this should be a little quieter of a trade deadline day. It's not going to be too crazy. And then we have some of the biggest moves I think I've seen in the last few years happen on the deadline. So it was really fun. If the last move is Trevor Penning to the Chargers, which I hope is not, like I still think there's more guys left to be dealt, it still has been a pretty fun deadline.
The Jets, obviously, the story here. So we're going to start with that. We're going to roll through every single trade. We're going to give out some winners and losers on this one. Our usual Tuesday format, that's scrapped out the window because we have a lot to talk about. And then we'll get to, at the end of the show, a little power rankings, how we see the AFC, how we see the NFC as it stands right now. But let's get into that Jets. Two moves today. Big one. We'll start with this one. We'll start with the Quinnen Williams trade to the Cowboys because Jerry Jones kind of teased it. The rumors were they weren't done making moves after the Micah Parsons trade earlier this year. And so they get, a top 10 defensive tackle in the NFL, but it does cost them. They have to send away Mozzie Smith, their first rounder from a couple years ago. That's not the big cost, though. The big cost was a 2026 second rounder and a 2027 first rounder the Cowboys give up for Quinnen Williams.
The way I see this is the Cowboys saw what happened on Monday night in primetime football against the Cardinals, where the Cardinals ran up and down the field on them. And Jerry Jones was like, we can't have that happen again on national television. First adding Logan Wilson earlier this morning, now adding Quinnen Williams. And I love watching Quinnen Williams because he is such a physical and dominant force against the run. He's so impactful, so strong, but also can read blocks really well from the defensive tackle spot, which is something they really need to help defend the run. I do wonder how that rotation is going to shake out because they have now, I believe, 3 highly paid defensive tackles, although Kenny Clark is probably on his way out after this season. I wonder how they're going to play that rotation. None of the coaches in Dallas are really 3-4 guys. So I think they're going to stick to their 4-3, like base defense, 4 down front. So I wonder how the rotation shakes out with Osa, Odigizua, Kenny Clark, and Quinnen Williams. But this is a truly impactful, one of, I'd argue, the 5 best defensive tackles in the NFL.
Yeah, you don't trade a second and a first to put him as part of a rotation, right? Like he's your featured guy, and then you figure out what to do with the other two. But I don't love this move from the Cowboys' perspective for a couple of reasons. One, usually when you're trading for a guy who's already signed a contract, that guy's coming relatively cheap because the signing bonus has eaten up a big chunk of his deal. That's not quite the case for Quinnen Williams. $22 million on the books next year in terms of base salary, 25.5 after that. So he's getting a good chunk of change against the cap, and then you're really only getting 2 years of him. I think we can all admit this year's probably down the drain for the Cowboys in terms of playoff potential. You make this move for what you could be in the future, but it's really only 2 years, and then he's going to be 30 years old, and then you got to decide whether you want to sign him or not. So it's 2 picks, a pick each year that he's going to be on your team. That I don't know. I just, of all the moves made, I think this one was one of the most lopsided in terms of returns. I did not love it for the Dallas Cowboys.
I understand where you're coming from with, the longevity of the deal for the Cowboys. They're not exactly in contention this year to go and win a Super Bowl. But when you look at what Dallas needed and when you look at sort of this upcoming draft class, there's not really guys like Quinnen Williams who can impact the run the way that Quinnen Williams can. There's not really an impactful defensive tackle outside of maybe Peter Woods, and he's going to go really early in this draft. So I just think that being able to already get the guy that is going to help this team right now and get as close to the playoffs as possible, even though We'll get to it at the end, but I do think the bottom part of the NFC, like around that 7 seed, is going to get really fascinating. But I do think that adding Quinnen Williams right now is really going to help them shore up their defensive front, and it'll take a lot of attention off a lot of other guys up there so they can produce.
The interesting part about this to me, from the Jets' perspective, and we'll get to like a full Jets recap and all the picks they got after when we do our winners and losers, but they got a 2027 first instead of a 2026 first. And I usually that's called, you take a discount for future years. Usually future firsts, when you're out in the future, are worth less than the near term firsts. But if you have an eye towards scouting and have looked at this class and you've looked at the 2027 class, this is a down year. And especially I think where that Cowboys will be picking middle of the first, you're not getting a blue chip player there. So if they were to get that first round pick for this year, it wouldn't be here. 2027, though, on the other hand, is an elite class already. There are, Jeremiah Smith's going to be in it. Dylan Stewart from South Carolina is going to be in it. There are a lot of guys who already look like special prospects in that 2027 class. So I think it was a shrewd move on the Jets' part to get the 2027 first instead of the 2026 first.
Yeah, and initially I was a little like they didn't get the 2026 first round pick instead of 2027, but then you look at the 2027 class, like you said, Jeremiah Smith, Dylan Stewart, Cam Coleman from Auburn also going to be a part of that class, and there's just a lot of impactful players. I do think the outlook for the Jets team is, hey, maybe you go get your quarterback this year and then stock up to go and make the big move for a guy like Jeremiah Smith maybe in 2027.
All right, other Jets move here. Not only did they send away Quinnen Williams, but they send away Sauce Gardner, former top 5 pick, their number 1 corner. They send him to the Indianapolis Colts, and the haul on this one, massive. 2026 first rounder, 2027 first rounder, and last year's second round wide receiver, Adonai Mitchell.
This is one where I think when you said you were a little more confused on this one for Quinnen Williams, I think I have a little bit more confusion on this one for the Colts, because I see the scheme fit and I see the player fit. Sauce Gardner is an immediate, like with his length and disruption at line of scrimmage, really fits what Lou Anarumo wants to do. But now you're looking long-term. You've traded 2 first-round picks. You have to go win the Super Bowl right now. This has to be a Super Bowl year, and you are putting all your chips on the table with Daniel Jones as your quarterback. And while that is he's played very well this season, that is a very risky proposition. Just ask the Giants what happens when you hitch your wagon to Daniel Jones for the long term. So I do wonder how this is going to play out past this year. But when it comes to on the field, I think Sauce Gardner is an immediate fit. Again, just the length, the physicality at the line of scrimmage. I do wonder if he's going to get back to his all-pro level production. I don't think we've gotten that in the last few years, but if he can get to that, then it makes sense for the Colts.
Here's the thing about Gardner and why I like this a little bit more from the Colts perspective than I do Quinnen Williams once from the Cowboys perspective. I agree with your points about Daniel Jones, that it's like, hey, this is an all-in move. You realize who's your quarterback, right? You saw what just happened this past weekend. Like, you know that he's liable to, I don't want to say turn into a pumpkin. He's obviously in his best situation ever been in. He's not going to revert to the guy you saw in the Giants. Like, the situation's too good. But you are going all in with him. You are basically forcing yourself now to sign him, and you gave Daniel Jones a ton of leverage in that scenario because he's on a 1-year deal. So you make a move like this, you better retain Daniel Jones. So now he knows that, and you didn't sign him before this deal, so the price just went up for Daniel Jones also. But why I like this one, again, to circle back, you get 5 years of Sauce Gardner. He is under contract for 5 years. He is 25 years old. The term on this one, how long that guy is going to be making an impact for you, is just so much longer than it is for Quinnen Williams, realistically. And with Sauce Gardner, how he plays with his length, like he could end his career in Indy, and it could be like 6-7 years. So if you're Chris Ballard and you're the GM of the Indianapolis Colts, and you've kind of been starved since the Andrew Luck retirement, right? You haven't made the playoffs since 2020. And heading into the season, you were teetering on the edge of losing your job. This gives you job security. You at least are going to be the GM there, I think, for the next 2 to 3 years. Yeah, maybe in terms of long-term team building strategy, you can question it. But I like it because I think Sauce Gardner is an elite player in his prime, and he's young. So for all those reasons, it feels more similar to like the Micah Parsons trade for me than what the Quinnen Williams trade was for the Dallas Cowboys.
And I guess that's where I'm sort of at, where I think Sauce Gardner is a very good player, but you essentially did the Micah Parsons trade, like you said, for Sauce Gardner. I don't know if Sauce Gardner is the Micah Parsons caliber.
He's making half as much money, though. He's making half as much money, so.
Yeah, he's obviously on a value deal, but when it comes to compare to Micah Parsons, but you're trading 2 picks and a player for a guy in Sauce Gardner, where honestly, I don't know how many guys you trade multiple first-round picks and a player for in the NFL that aren't quarterbacks. I mean, we just saw Micah do it. I'd say like Myles Garrett. If you want to look at the position, I mean, maybe only Pat Surtain. We can have a conversation about Derek Stingley, but I don't know. And those are 2 guys who I think are better than Sauce Gardner at this stage. So I do wonder if he's going to be able to find that all-pro caliber like play in a new environment, one that will probably see him, if the Colts are still able to get out to leads, teams are going to have to throw the ball more. You'll see a little bit more production. So I hope for him and for the Colts, he gets back to that level of production.
I think the underrated part of this trade, though, to me, Adonai Mitchell, getting a fresh start. I love that for him. And I love that for the Jets, because you had Garrett Wilson and then just like zilch in terms of guys who can get open. If there's anything Adonai Mitchell can do, it's get open now. Anything else about the receiver position, we have big question marks about. But I think a new change of scenery, new situation, new OC and Tanner Engstrand, no one really to compete with. Like, he is your number 2 tomorrow. I think you don't necessarily need wide receiver now. Wide receiver was such a massive need. Adonai Mitchell could ultimately be that guy for you. And this could actually be a pretty good situation. If we're talking about the Jets at the top of next year's draft, and after this trade, they'll probably be at the top of next year's draft. Whatever quarterback's walking in there, this actually isn't that bad a situation for him, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what the Jets have, and why I think the Jets have really done a good job at this deadline, is they have traded away a lot of quality talent without losing their offensive lineman or Garrett Wilson. Yes. I think those are the guys that you really needed to keep a part of this young core that's moving into the future. And the Jets are able to do that. They've added so many picks. I think they have 2 first-round picks this year and then 3 first-round picks in 2027. This is, I don't want to say it's Lions-ish, but it does feel Lions-ish when it comes to what the Lions did with trading Matthew Stafford and how Brad Holmes rebuilt that team. Obviously, Aaron Glenn has a Detroit connection, but this feels like what the Lions did to rebuild their roster. So they're in a good place. It's just now about finding the right players, which obviously comes with a little bit more strain because you are the New York Jets.
Yeah, you have the Lions as a recent example, but then you also have the 2017-2018 Browns as a recent example, where they had a lot of those picks and didn't quite go as planned, although it still turned around the franchise. I mean, they still made the playoffs after that run. There's not a lot of teams who have had this much draft capital in this short amount of time and not seen their fortunes change a lot, because when you're paying a lot of guys, not a lot of money, which is the rookie contract in today's day and age, it lets you build the roster through other avenues, other trades, free agency, that sort of thing. All right. There's the Jets. There's their moves. We're going to take a quick break. After that, going to get to the rest of the trades we saw go down on a jam-packed trade deadline day.
Hi. Novocaine?
Novocaine! Novocaine is now streaming on Paramount+.
You're going to love this.
Oh, you're strong! It's wildly entertaining and an absolute blast.
I'm in.
Novocaine, rated R, now streaming on Paramount+.
My naive self saw Jaelen Phillips deal go down yesterday when I woke up. 3rd rounder to the Philadelphia Eagles, and I thought, there's the blockbuster of the deadline. There's the big move. Little did I know it was going to happen today, but the Eagles send a 3rd rounder, Jaelen Phillips, former 1st rounder, expiring contract. So not a long-term move. That's why it's only a 3rd rounder for a guy who's still performing despite his injury history. And I think the interesting thing here is that the Eagles really only made 1 move because they have so many picks still. They have a 1st, a 2nd, 2 thirds, 2 fourths, 3 fifths, and a 6th in this upcoming draft, even after dealing a 3rd for Jaelen Phillips.
And I think this makes a lot of sense for the Eagles, because very quietly, their pass rush hasn't really been up to par this season. They're 17th in pressure rate this season. And of course, there have been games where Jalen Carter has missed. There have been games they've missed Nolan Smith, but you could tell they are still feeling the effects of not having Josh Sweat, not having Brandon Graham for the first part of the year. Now you add a guy in Jaelen Phillips who, despite the injury history, he has shown this season he can still win. He is still a very productive pass rusher. And now you get him back with Vic Fangio, back somewhere where he knows the defense already. And I think this is just another iteration of you can never have too many pass rushers. You can never have too many defensive linemen. The way Philly won the Super Bowl last year is by rotating hockey lines of defensive linemen. And now you can sort of reduce guys into smaller roles. You can have Patrick Johnson play a little bit lighter of a role. You can have Jalix Hunt be a little bit more situational, because I think Phillips can win both as a run defender and a pass rusher. So you have so many good questions now because you have a lot of talent in that defensive front seven.
Yeah, a lot of talent is an understatement. The Eagles' edge room, and obviously with some injuries, Nolan Smith and whatnot, but when fully healthy, Jaelen Phillips, Josh Uche, Jalix Hunt, Brandon Graham, and I just said his name, Nolan. I'm blanking on his name, Nolan Smith. So all in that edge group, Vic Fangio gets his rotation still. And yeah, I think for the Philadelphia Eagles, this is kind of just business as usual, a low-hanging fruit trade for a guy who's going to produce for you when on the football field. And will net you if and when he signs a big deal, because he'll probably look at his best in Philly. Most guys do. And he'll probably sign a pretty sizable deal this offseason, even if it's not with Philly. And they'll get the compensatory pick for this, as they do. They're one of the best at playing that game in the NFL. So, like I said, I thought this was going to be the blockbuster. It's a big move. I think it's a underrated move, may not be a household name, but Jaelen Phillips is a guy who can rush the passer. And yeah, I think the Philadelphia Eagles, I was going to say they vaulted themselves to number one, but we're going to get to this trade. The Saints sending Rashid Shaheed to the Seattle Seahawks, which I thought Chris Olave might be the one who got moved to the Seattle Seahawks, but this one does the trick as well. Seattle gives a 2026 fourth and 2026 fifth for Shaheed, and now Shaheed gets paired back with former offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak.
This is my favorite trade of the deadline. I think this rules so much because it is the Seahawks adding a strength to a strength when it comes to their passing offense and being just so much more explosive. Sam Darnold leads the NFL in air yards per attempt this season. They are obviously one of the best downfield passing teams in the league this year. And Rashid Shaheed is one of the fastest players in the NFL right now. Not only that, but he has concentration. He has focus on those downfield targets. And it's just going to open up a lot of levels in the offense. The offense will have layers. And Seattle now just has another receiver they can rely on outside of JSN. So you're looking at a rotation of JSN, Rashid Shaheed, Torrey Horton, and Cooper Kupp, which legitimately is a good to very good receiver quadruplet. It's a very good core when it comes to winning in 2025. And then the way that they play their offense with as much base as they see, with as much 12 personnel as they run, having Shaheed on the field, it makes it impossible to defend this team if they throw the ball out of that 12 personnel. Because if you have bigger bodies on the field, there's no way you can defend everybody because of just the spacing that they'll have now.
I always mess up. You said quadruplet. I feel like I always mess up. I always say duo for 2, trio for 3. And then when it's 4, I'm like, what the hell do I say?
I just it was either quadruplet or core. I've done quadruplet, quintuplet. We need a better word.
It's technically, I just looked it up, quartet.
Oh,
quartet's for 4.
Quartet. Oh,
quintet for 5. So quartet, we're going to remember it on the show now. When we talk about a 4 deep, it's the quartet. I loved it. I love this move for the Seahawks. And it's something that, all your points spot on, that that I was worried about with this offense. It obviously hasn't mattered because JSN has single-handedly been their everything. He has not only been their underneath intermediate, but he's been a deep guy as well. I actually saw this very interesting stat. I don't even call it a stat. It was GPS numbers. His play speed, Sumer Sports does a GPS to what your timed 40 would be based off of your GPS times on the football field. His time coming out was in the 4.5s, JSN. Play speed right now, this year, 2025, 4.39 is what they would estimate him as. It's gone down every single year of his career. That's called a guy putting in the work. So now you have a 4.39 estimated based off of how fast he's playing on a football field in JSN. And then the other guy next to him now, Rashid Shaheed, is even faster. Is one of the fastest in the NFL when he's at top speed. I'm not sure there's anyone right now I would take over him. Maybe Xavier Worthy. That's really about it at the receiver position. So, yeah, the cupboard is full there in Seattle. A move that everyone kind of pointed to. It's like one of those Saints wide receivers that made too much sense. This one, job well done by John Schneider, their GM for the Seahawks.
And it doesn't even factor in that Torrey Horton ran a 4.4. So now you have three legit dudes who can roll. And again, when you play as much base defense as the Seahawks have seen, even when they're at 11 personnel, teams play them in base, which I find so fascinating. But his speed will open up a lot of lanes, not only for the passing game, but should loosen up things in the run game because you can't play this team in base anymore. They're just going to keep hammering you with explosive passes.
No, I think we're going to see a big change in that regard down the second half. There's just no way you can't survive against this team if you do. All right, let's get to the next move here. Raiders sending Jakobi Meyers to the Jaguars. It was not a well-kept secret that he was going to be sent somewhere. Turns out it's the Jacksonville Jaguars, and it costs a 4th and a 6th next year for the Jaguars to get his services.
I just want people to understand who Trevor Lawrence was throwing the ball to on Sunday with Travis Hunter out and Brian Thomas Jr. shaken up with injury. Parker Washington was the leading receiver, followed by Tim Jones and Austin Trammell and Hunter Long at tight end. This receiver core, this skill position group has been decimated by injuries this season, especially with Brian Thomas Jr. not being 100%. And we've talked ad nauseum on this show about the drops and the penalties and just the missed landmarks by this receiver group. Oh, and I didn't even mention De'Ami Brown got hurt in that game, did not come back. So now you have a guy in Jakobi Meyers who does exactly what Brian Thomas Jr. doesn't, and also what Travis Hunter is still learning, which is he is so physical, he's tough over the middle of the field, and he's going to do the dirty work, and he also doesn't drop passes. I think that's the biggest thing. He just doesn't drop passes. So you have a guy over the middle of the field, which now allows Brian Thomas Jr. to do more of the outside receiver stuff that he was really good at last season, and then you mix Travis Hunter in to do more of the explosive stuff downfield. Now it just feels like this offense has a little bit more layering to it, and then you add Brenton Strange when he gets healthy. I think the comp for this, the compensation might be a little steep, but when you think about I think it's the 4th round pick that they got it's the lower 4th round pick that they got in I think it was the Cam Robinson deal, and then their 6th round pick. So you trade 2 picks away, and Jacksonville still has 11 picks in the 2026 draft. I wanted to believe that this team wasn't done. I still thought they might have been in on Quinnen Williams, but obviously that didn't happen. But they still have a lot more room to go make deals and still more room to add to this team moving forward. So I kind of like the deal for Jacksonville.
Yeah, you don't have a first rounder, but load up on more picks down the line. That's the Rams method that they used for so many years without any first rounders, and obviously James Gladstone bringing it to Jacksonville. Because then when you have a bunch of those mid-round picks, you can make deals like this. Like you can make a deal that gets you a sure-handed guy for the offense that's dropped the highest percentage of passes. It is almost unconscionable, 12.1%. It would be the second highest that's a stat from PFF. So the second highest since PFF started recording for a starting quarterback over the course of the season, if that continues. 12.1% is so insanely high. And Jakobi Meyers is one of the most sure-handed wide receivers in the NFL. So a move that makes sense for more than one reason there. Let's get to the Bengals. Sending not Trey Hendrickson, Logan Wilson, the fan favorite to the Cowboys. Cowboys send a 6th rounder in return. Wilson obviously expendable given that really wasn't even playing in Al Golden's defense. So for the Dallas Cowboys, an upgrade to their second level, and for the Bengals, at least a modicum of draft capital.
Has anybody seen Kenneth Murray play football this year? Like that is the one. That's the rationale for this deal.
Have you seen Kenneth Murray ever play football since he left Oklahoma?
Yeah, Kenneth Murray should not be on an NFL field when it comes to playing linebacker. Logan Wilson has instincts in coverage. I think he is still a very smart player, although he's lost a step. But when you get Overshawn back, when you have Maris Liufau, you have two athletic guys next to him. And so I think his role will be a little bit more streamlined. But when you have Quinnen Williams and Kenny Clark in front of him, he'll take a little bit of hits off of him. So I like the deal for him, and I do think it's going to help their defense in the short term. I still do think they're going to need to add a linebacker like long term if Logan Wilson is just going to be your short term, see what you can do this year deal.
Yeah, this was a 2025 deal. This was not the long term deal that the Quinnen Williams was. And with the Cowboys deadline deals, to me, they would have made a lot more sense if they won yesterday. I think they had these negotiations as if they were going to win yesterday, and then just kind of were like, shoot, let's do them anyway. Well, we need to sell more jerseys. We need to get people talking. Let's pull the trigger on these deals, because the timing of them, it just doesn't feel like you make a deadline deal at the trade deadline if you need the guy this year. If you need a guy next year, you make that deal in the offseason, because then the price comes down. Because at the deadline, usually the price is about as high as it's going to get, because most teams have that desperation for this season. We need to plug this hole right now. And like the teams you're bidding against to get someone like Quinnen Williams, they're probably more in need of it. So yeah, I'm just curious. That is all I'll say about this Cowboys direction.
The spin zone here, if you are a Cowboys fan, is you make the deal because you got embarrassed on national television. That's why these deals are made. Jerry Jones saw that team go up against the Jakobi Brissett-led Cardinals and get dunked on for 60 minutes and knew something had to change defensively. I mean, that team was awful in the run game and the passing game. So you had to go add these guys just to see if you can get something for 2025, because even though they did lose the game, the Cowboys still aren't really out of it when it comes to making the playoffs.
And not only did he get dunked on, you passed on a guy who dunked on you in Walter Nolan, who looked awesome last night for the Arizona Cardinals. Oh, so good. And he was going up against the guy you unfortunately drafted in Tyler Booker. Now, unfortunately, Tyler Booker's great. I'm not going to knock that pick whatsoever. But if you needed a DT, Walter Nolan would have looked really good in a Cowboys jersey right then and there. All right, next move. Titans send Draymond Jones, the edge rusher that they just signed in free agency, to the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens send a conditional 5th-round pick in return.
This was sort of they needed a thumper in the run game, play for sort of a heavy edge for them, because David Ojabo is not a run defender. Mike Green is not a run defender. They needed somebody with a little bit more heft in the run game. And Draymond Jones can do that on early downs. You can rotate your guys in passing situations. So I like the deal just for the value that they got. And this is going to be one of those where like the dude's probably going to outplay what he was traded for. And everybody's going to look back and be like, dang, the Ravens got to steal again.
Yeah, he can play a role on a defensive line that just needs role players. You need anyone that can give you good snaps. And it's doesn't cost you much. He's literally doesn't cost much against the cap, $1.9 million this year. So for the Baltimore Ravens, I do wonder how much he plays, or if he plays a little bit more inside, because he's been an edge of late. But early on in his career with the Denver Broncos, his best years came as a 3-tech. That's where he was in Ohio State coming out. So I wonder if he's kind of your Nnamdi Madubuike replacement here this year.
That makes sense as well. And I think with the way that Mike Macdonald, I know it's in two different scenarios, two different situations, but the way that Mike Macdonald has played DeMarcus Lawrence in Seattle could sort of inform how Zach Orr plays Draymond Jones as sort of this heavy 5, where you have him playing on the edge, early downs, kick him inside in passing situations. And then that just allows you to be more versatile with your chess pieces. That's something that the Ravens have really wanted to do, especially since moving Kyle Hamilton up closer to the line of scrimmage. So now it just gives them so many more people to work with up there.
All right, next move. Browns trading away Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, another recently inked free agent, to the Chicago Bears. Bears send a 6th-rounder for Tryon-Shoyinka, the former 1st-rounder's services.
Yeah, this is just sort of a warm body deal. Deo Adingbo tore his Achilles after the Bengals game. They just needed somebody to fill out the depth on that defensive line. I think they're still hoping for Austin Booker consistent pass rush play because I think that will be huge for this team. But this was more just a depth signing.
Yeah, he's played 31 snaps all season. All right, and then the last one, we mentioned it off the top. Trevor Penning to the Los Angeles Chargers, the guard / tackle for the Saints, fetches a 2027 sixth. So the former first rounder whose 5th-year deal didn't get picked up, 5th-year option didn't get picked up, goes for only a 2027 sixth.
This, again, they just needed a body. If you're the Chargers, I mean, Bobby Hart got hurt. Joe Alt's out for the rest of the season. It's getting to the point where you just need somebody healthy to play up front. So I think that's really why you do the deal if you're Los Angeles. And then if you're New Orleans, it still just kind of stinks that you came into this season with, I believe, 4 or 5, all 5-year starting offensive linemen were first rounders, and you still have a terrible offensive line.
Such a bad offensive line. Oh my gosh. And Penning, I honestly think he plays back at tackle with the Chargers. I mean, that's why you're trading for him, even though he was a left guard this entire season. At least in the running game, can at tackle, has in the past looked good. We'll see, though. I do think it's kind of hurt him that he's bounced to 3 different positions in 3 years. I wonder if he just goes back to his college position of left tackle. And that's where he plays for the Chargers, obviously, with Alt being out for the season and Slater being out for the season. And gosh, I don't know who they're going to be playing next to Penning on the other side, wherever he does end up. All right, there's your winners and losers there's all your trade deadline moves. We're going to be getting to winners and losers right after. Quick break.
They want to take this place from us.
My family is in danger. My wife is lost to me, and I don't have time.
1923, new season now streaming exclusively on Paramount Plus.
All right, winners and losers. JP, give us your first winner from the trade deadline.
My first winner, we talked about him earlier, is Rashid Shaheed and the Seattle Seahawks. This deal is just awesome. I think it just makes so much sense with Shaheed having experience in Clint Kubiak's offense, Sam Darnold being such an explosive downfield passer. The Seahawks just needed to make another deal to bring them over the top. And now I think the Seahawks are making a serious case to be the best team in the NFC and have a real shot at making a Super Bowl behind what might be arguably the best offense in the league.
Yeah, that one, just because it has a 4th and a 5th, it's such little draft capital for a guy who's going to make such an impact there. I mean, he was, it's just back to early on last season with the Saints with Clint Kubiak. That offense was so explosive. It was insane. And his speed was a big part of it. Early downs with Shaheed on one side, JSN on the other. Good luck. Good luck against the play action passing game that Clint Kubiak schemes up, because you can't get both those guys. There's just no way. Not a lot of defenses in the NFL, I'd venture to say none, have the kind of secondary that can really match up with both of those guys on every given snap.
Sam Darnold's going to finish with like an ADOT of like 80 this season.
Dude, the MVP candidacy, I said it half jokingly, it's real. I would not be surprised whatsoever now. I think he has to be at least amongst your 3 favorites. You can't be any lower than 3 at this point in terms of MVP candidacy.
Yeah, I think so. At this point, with the offense looking the way it does, who would have thought Sam Darnold, MVP candidate?
I love it. All right. My winner, Adonai Mitchell, massive winner. And it's not only because I was super high on him coming out and because I love watching his tape, because the guy moves he is legitimately, when you watch him and just how he is capable of moving on a football field, he's one of the most 10 gifted athletes at receiver in the entire NFL. Like, truly is. And he goes to a place where they probably have one of the other 10 in Garrett Wilson, just in terms of the way those guys move on a football field. It's unique to have 2 guys that are that athletically gifted, and usually it ends up working out if you can get him to be consistent. And that's obviously in Indianapolis, post fumble through the back of the end zone. He didn't even see the field, man. He has been a pariah there ever since that. And not only that, it was the holding penalty after that as well that took a Jonathan Taylor touchdown off the board. But he needed a new start, needed a fresh start. I think this could, it feels like a throwaway piece, but I think we could be looking back on this as much more than a throwaway piece in the coming years.
Yeah, I think with A.D. Mitchell, like you said, he's incredibly talented. He's made so many cool plays and just moves differently. I think for him, it's just getting the reps and the confidence. Like we joked about, I think earlier in the season, but he's like the wide receiver Anthony Richardson, where you just got to get him reps and let him just go figure it out. This is the perfect place for him to just figure it out. The Jets don't have another receiver outside of Garrett Wilson. You can finally see what A.D. Mitchell is made of, and it's not really coming at such a massive, like drastic cost for the Jets. So I'm excited to see what he does in a new area. And if, like you said, if he's locked in, like you have a really fun wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2.
All right, what's your next winner from the deadline?
My next winner is the New York Jets. A very big player moving forward. Of course, this is a lot of projection, and I understand that because it is the Jets, and they still have to hit on those players. But the process going about this is incredibly smart. You weren't really going anywhere with this defense full of great young players because you really couldn't find the quarterback, and this defense hadn't really gelled. It was a lot of guys that weren't fits for Aaron Glenn's system. So you trade your impact players, you trade your stars, but you were still able to keep the offensive line intact. You were able to keep Garrett Wilson. I actually think keeping Breece Hall might be good for them in just being able to you can play him on the tag and let your young quarterback have another good running back, offensive line, and a potential wide receiver 1 for whoever steps in there. But I do think the Jets have done a lot of smart business. And like you said, they got 2 picks this year, 3 picks in 2027. Let's go see what Aaron Glenn is made of. Let's go see what Darren Mogies is made of. This is the time that you got to earn your paycheck.
Yeah, dude. Darren Mogies living out. I tweeted this every draft analyst stream. He has 2 firsts upcoming year, 2 seconds, 3 firsts the year after that. It's like, that's what you live for. It's just, I think every football fan at one point playing Madden or myself, like back in the day, NFL Live, when that was the game, always had a time where in franchise mode, you would trade away your entire team for picks and then just like start it up and just see what you could do with those picks and like have this super young roster and see those guys develop. Everyone's done that before. Not a lot of guys have actually done it in real life. And so now Darren Mogi gets to do it. But again, you got to hit on the picks. The crazy thing is there was a point where the Jets did hit on the picks. That 2021 draft or 2022 draft, with Sauce, with Garrett Wilson, Jermaine Johnson, Breece Hall, like they hit on the picks. And now here we are, Jermaine Johnson, Breece Hall, the lone standing guys from that one. Garrett Wilson as well. But it just didn't work out, unfortunately. We'll see if it does in the future. And my next biggest winner, Vic Fangio, just getting not only Jaelen Phillips, but they got Jair Alexander too. We'll see if he's got his head on straight. I don't think it's a lack of talent at this point. He's still 28 years old. The last time we saw him in Green Bay, he was very good last year. Just obviously whatever the heck's going on with him in Baltimore behind the scenes, we don't know, but moved on. If he can play for them, if Jaelen Phillips is the guy we've seen, Vic Fangio has another full cupboard to work with, and really like you don't need to blitz. Like it puts them in a situation where they don't have to be blitz heavy again. They can win with 4 consistently.
And I also like to add Michael Carter to that group. He is going to play the nickel.
Oh, yeah.
You allow Cooper DeJean to sort of be your, I guess Cooper DeJean is Vic Fangio's Trent McDuffie with the way that he can move inside and outside. You can be more versatile with your secondary. You don't have to play Keely Ringo or Adoree Jackson, which I think is probably the biggest benefit or biggest reason Vic Fangio is a winner. But like you said, the Eagles have blitzed a lot this season compared to previous years with Fangio. It feels like that's because they weren't able to get pass rush. And because they blitzed so much, it left their corners on islands. And outside of Quinnen Mitchell, they didn't really have a guy that was really able to survive on that island outside. Now you've addressed that, and you've addressed the lack of being able to win with 4. And this should be able to help the Eagles reload to the point where, you can win with 4 now. Let's go see it, make it happen. And the Eagles are still one of the best teams in the NFL.
Eventful deadline, but not everyone gets to be called a winner. let's get to some losers from the deadline. Who's your first one?
My first one is the Miami Dolphins. And the reason the Dolphins are a loser here for me is because you were only able to trade Jaelen Phillips. That was the only guy that got moved. For all of the Dolphins are going to be big sellers. They're going to be looking to trade Jaelen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Jordan Brooks was available, Minka Fitzpatrick, Jalen Waddle potentially. They only traded one of those guys. And it feels like the Dolphins are stuck in this, like we have all these talented players, but also need to rebuild and also might not have the coach that is going to like usher this group into the next era. So it feels like they could have done a little bit more with trading guys away. Maybe they were asking too much. I think I remember seeing that Jalen Waddle was being asked to be traded for like a first rounder, which I thought might have been a little steep for Jalen Waddle, but I think they could have done a little bit more in clearing house.
Yeah, I'm with you there, but at least you got one guy out the door. And it's always hard when they fire Chris Grier right before the deadline. You fired your GM right before the deadline. Like at least, so you have to have an interim come in. Champ Kelly's your interim GM. He's negotiating the deals. You're really not in a good situation there having interim GM do the fire sale thing. So maybe next off season's when we see it. Maybe we see a lot of these guys dealt next spring. TBD. I feel for Dolphins fans either way. My team that I also feel for living here, Bengals fans. Trey Hendrickson still on this roster. He's still on this roster. Not to like, yes, your team is better for having Trey Hendrickson on the roster. And obviously, as we've seen without him, it's a disaster. But why not trade? Like, why not get anything? He's going to walk next spring. You're going to get a compensatory. It may not be that high a compensatory because he is 31 years old. You kind of did hold him hostage to where he's not going to get that massive contract. So I don't know, man. I feel bad for Bengals fans because this just is, it's just bad business to have him on this roster this season. It just truly is.
My question to Duke Tobin and the Bengals front office is, what do you think you are this year? Do you think you're actually going to try and make a run? You just gave up 49 points to the Chicago Bears in regulation. That wasn't an overtime game. They gave up 49 points in a regulation game. And Trey Hendrickson, of course, fantastic player. It just felt like maybe the injury sort of kept teams from trading with them. But there's no reason why he should still be on the team because you're trying to usher in a new era for this defense. You're trying to get as many picks as possible. And now if Trey Hendrickson walks in free agency, like you said, you're in a third-round comp pick, but you could have gotten so much more for the guy because you traded him at the right time. It just feels like the Bengals are very reactive. They always do things a year or two after you're supposed to get them done, and it ends up costing them in the long run. And it feels like this Trey Hendrickson saga is the biggest example of that.
You're 3-6. You're 3-6. And you have Joe Flacco. I mean, like, and you don't have Joe Burrow. And you have a defense that's allowed 300 points already. They've allowed 300 points already. They're on pace for almost 600 points allowed this season. Whew. Okay. Who's your next loser?
My next loser is the Kansas City Chiefs. And the reason I say the Chiefs is because the entire deadline, it was linked. Kansas City Chiefs, Breece Hall, coming down to the wire. Everybody's like, Breece Hall wants to be traded. Breece Hall is posting gifts as if like saying like I'm next, or like who's coming to get me. It feels like he is the one guy that everybody wanted from the Jets. And it feels like the Chiefs were right there, but didn't give enough to go and get him. And it seems like the Jets wanted a third-round pick for Breece Hall. The Chiefs were offering, according to Nate Taylor, a compensatory, like fourth-round pick, a conditional fourth-round pick that could turn into a third-round pick. If that was the sticking point for not trading for Breece Hall, come on, man. Like you're doing all this conditional, like if and or but with Breece Hall, who could immediately help your offense in ways that I don't think any of their running backs can right now. It just feels like bad business. It feels like we're sticking over real minute points, especially for a Chiefs team that is 5-4. I mean, they're one of the best teams, if not the best team in the NFL, but you're sitting at 5-4. You're not going to have the luxury of the home field advantage. You're not going to have the luxury. You might not have the luxury of getting home field in the wild card. So I just wonder why they didn't make this trade if that was the sticking point.
I am very surprised that the Chiefs didn't make a move. Not necessarily that Brees didn't get moved because, as you said, you can tag him. It's not super expensive to tag him because it's a running back. And you could just like be in the same spot next year because he's young. He's 24. He was, 20-year-old on draft day coming out. So you can be in the same spot next year and the market will still be there, right? You'll still have people banging on your door if he should be, healthy then at this point in time and you want to move him. But for the Chiefs, it's like the AFC is ripe for the taking. And my loser is actually the AFC because all the big movers here, all the teams making a play for this season and the AFC specifically for this season are in the NFC. Like the Seahawks got better. The Eagles got better. Those are probably the top two teams in the NFC right now. And that's who's going to be, one of those, somewhat, whoever it is from the NFC is more likely than not, whoever's representing the NFC in the Super Bowl is going to be the better side yet again this year. Like I think the AFC looks like the much weaker conference at this point in time. And the fact that no one made a move to try to get to the top is very surprising to me.
I'm honestly a little surprised the Broncos didn't make a move offensively. Like that again, we talk about the AFC is ripe for the taking. The Broncos are leading the AFC West. They have a chance to really put this division out of hand. Like they can really build their lead out. And it felt like they're kind of just sitting on their hands. I know they were sort of linked to Jaelen Waddle and the first round pick compensation sort of scared them off, but it just feels like they could have done a little bit more. I think a Rashid Shaheed could help that offense a little bit. I think a guy like Olave would have helped for the Broncos offense, but it just felt like they could have done a lot more. I think outside of the Colts, I mean, we talked about Kansas City, Buffalo need to add a little more receiver. Like there's just so many different things that I think the AFC teams could have done that really didn't, that make me wonder, like, are you guys really good with what you got?
All right. What's your last loser here, JP?
My last loser is the nothing ever happens at the deadline, people. This is a massive L for team nothing ever happens in the NFL. This was insane. This was an incredible deadline with the Jets making the two biggest trades of the not two, they're two of the three biggest trades of the year. You have Rashid Shaheed going, you have multiple first round picks being traded. So I think this deadline, and then we saw deadlines from the last few years, like they really started to move a little bit. It just feels like the NFL starting to embrace a little more of the trade deadline and trading impact players. And it makes sense for this year because, like we said, there's so much parity. There's not a big difference between the good teams and the great ones. So the fact that we didn't set a record for most deals in a single deadline day is a little surprising.
I think it's only going to continue down this path. I think NFL GMs have seen the light. They understand how valuable draft picks are, even if it's just getting a 5th, 6th rounder back, that's something that can improve your roster beyond. And yeah, I think it's only going to, like I said, that's off the top. 3 of the top all-time seasons have been 3 of the last 4 seasons. So in terms of deadline moves, we'll continue to see that happen. My final loser, it's got to be Aaron Glenn. And with the caveat of also Jets fans who aren't draft fans, because it's going to stink for a little bit here. Obviously the rest of this year, 2026 now, you've written your sort of, I didn't think this was a full rebuild. I thought they could do a mini rebuild and bounce back next year if they just found their quarterback. This is now a full teardown situation. And it's just hard to maintain your spot as a head coach through a full teardown situation because they're obviously going to win, 3-4 games max this year, 3-4 games max next year. And if that's the case, how many head coaches survive that when you have back-to-back seasons where you're drafting like in the top 5? Not a lot. So I know him and Muji came in together. They were kind of a package deal, but I do think it's going to be tough for him to survive this just based off of numbers alone. When the talent ain't walking through that door for a few years here, Aaron Glenn's going to have an uphill climb.
So I actually think Aaron Glenn might be a little bit of a winner here because trading all these impact players means you have faith in his ability to rebuild this team. You know, he has got to be the guy to go and lead this team, this new era of Jets football. And so I think trading all these guys signals to him and Mogi that this is your team now. You can build it in the way that you want. And I actually think, like, if you're able to hit on the quarterback this year, maybe you can make something happen. I mean, I know we're going to keep bringing up the Detroit connection with Aaron Glenn, but Dan Campbell went 3-13 in his first year in Detroit, went 9-8 in 2022, and now the Lions are what they are now. But I think for obviously with Jets fans that don't follow the draft, you're just gonna have to get over that. You're gonna have to hold that one. Like that's good. You're gonna have to be logging into the mock draft simulators daily. Start watching tape.
I don't know how many there are though, given how the Jets have gone the last, I guess, just the history of the Jets. If you're not a fan of the draft and a Jets fan, you're as miserable as it gets because that's really all you got to look forward to most years, unfortunately, and this year specifically. All right. With all that being said, with the dust settled, with the trade deadline now passed, we're going to update our power rankings. JP, give me an AFC power ranking. Give me an NFC power ranking. How do we stand right now?
All right. So AFC power ranking. We'll start with number 1. We're going 1-7, or you want to go 7-1?
Go 7-1. Build some suspense for the people.
All right. My number 7 team in the AFC is the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that they have the defense. I think if they play like they did against the Colts, I think they can make a deep run. The offense still just doesn't generate explosives, but that's just going to be the way they live. Number 6, I have the Baltimore Ravens, and maybe this is just me falling forward again, but if Lamar is healthy, that is still one of the best offenses in football. And when Lamar Jackson is healthy, when you have everything going, that team is a playoff caliber team. My number 5 is the New England Patriots. I think that they are still very good. They are obviously leading the AFC East. I do have some questions just about their offensive line and sustainability, and you can't have Drake May getting hit as much as he does later on in the season. Number 4, I have the Denver Broncos. They are the best defense in football, one of the best play callers in football. We'll see what happens with the quarterback and just some of the lack of explosiveness. My number 3 team is Indianapolis Colts. I think they are similar to the Broncos, but I think the difference between the Broncos and the Colts is the Colts have impact players on the offensive side of the ball that can flip a game instead of where the Broncos are at. Then my number 2 is the Buffalo Bills. Number 1 is the Kansas City Chiefs.
All right. I'm a little different. I have the Jags at 7. No Steelers in my top 7. It was close, though. I think 6, 7, 8 was a toss-up for me, but I went Jags at 7. Ravens at 6 now that Lamar's back. Now that the defense looks back-ish, back adjacent, I'll say. Patriots at 5, we agree on. But then I'm lower on the Bills. I have them down here at 4.
Ooh.
Still don't really trust this defense. I know they just shut down Patrick Mahomes, but they're kind of a Jekyll and Hyde defense. And offensively, they haven't quite been the juggernaut I was hoping. I thought they could be really high end. Now, obviously, Josh Palmer being out's hurt that, but I have them down at 4. But it's also because I kind of like the 3 teams above them. Broncos at 3. That's obviously once Patrick Surtain gets back. I think I put them below the Bills right now. Colts at 2. I would not have had the Colts at 2 before the Sauce Gardner move, but you give them Sauce Gardner. Charvarius Ward's going to be back healthy at some point this season after that injury. That's a darn good 1-2 punch at corner. I mean, that is a formidable cornerback duo. They still have other issues on this, but like that's a very good secondary now. There is, as we saw kind of even with the Broncos defense last week, when you don't have that guy in the lineup, when you get that guy in your lineup, that guy who can really give number 1 wide receivers fits consistently, it makes everyone else kind of look better in that cornerback room and in that safety room. So I put the Colts up at 2. Chiefs are still 1, all in agreement there, but I think it's a tightly contested, at least the top 5, I think, could all end up being, the 1 seed when it's all said and done. It really is a tight top here, top the AFC.
So the Jaguars, I struggle with the Jaguars, Ravens, Steelers for the 6 and 7 spots. And the reason I didn't put the Jaguars, despite being a Jaguars fan, is this team is still so situationally poor. This team is they're still one of the youngest offenses in the NFL. They still commit the most penalties in the NFL. I'm hoping that Jakobi Meyers coming back will help some of the drop issues, but you're going to be out with Travis Hunter's not going to be back for another 3 weeks. Brenton Strange is probably going to be out another 2 weeks. Brian Thomas Jr. is nursing an injury. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they've struggled to get pass rush up the middle of the defense. You're still waiting for that defensive tackle pass rush production. So I just have a little bit more questions about some of their sustainability. But if we're talking about just like the highs, I think the Jaguars are a playoff team with their highs. I just worry about the lows being incredibly low.
I do feel as though I'm wish casting here a little bit. I'm like, they should be 7. They may not be 7. Honestly, if like they played the Steelers right now, the Steelers would probably be favored on a neutral site. But like they should be 7. They should be the 7th best team in the AFC. All right, let's flip it over to the NFC.
All right. My number 7 team in the NFC are the Fighting Jerrys. I do have the Dallas Cowboys at number 7. I think adding Quinnen Williams is going to help with the run defense. And then if they can just not be the worst defense in the NFL, that's all you need because the offense can legitimately make plays. I do worry about their offensive line when it comes to pass protection, which is why I can't move them any higher. But I do think this offense has enough talent to be the 7 seed in the NFC, where it's sort of a toss-up right now. Number 6, I have the Green Bay Packers. I think, again, the highs can be really high. I just really want them to iron out their run game because that's sort of that inconsistency is what's making the offense look inconsistent right now. My number 5 team is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I also wanted to put them higher, but until they get everybody back healthy, I just want to see if they can just get a little healthier on the offensive side of the ball specifically. Number 4, Los Angeles Rams. I think that they are in a very, very good spot when it comes to trying to be the number 1 seed because they have the quarterback playing at an elite level and they have the pass rush playing at an elite level. Then number 3 is the Detroit Lions. They're always going to be incredibly talented. I do worry about the injury to Christian Mahogany and then just some of the injuries on the defensive side of the ball. It's always going to be the issue there. Number 2 is the Philadelphia Eagles, and number 1 is the Seattle Seahawks.
I see it just a touch. I see the top 2 the same. I got Seahawks and Eagles. I think the Seahawks did enough with the Shaheed trade. I mean, did enough, and they've proven enough with their play of late that I would take them against anyone. That defense is elite, and I don't see this offense slowing down now with the Shaheed addition. Then I would go Packers at 3. Maybe a little bias here. They can just play with anybody. I think they will against the top teams in the NFC. They are on equal-ish footing. It's just they're on equal-ish footing against the bottom of the NFC seemingly too. So they're just a weird team. Lions at 4, Bucks at 5. I'm a little lower on the Rams just because I think they're exploitable. So when they go up against a very good team, there are issues and places that you can easily attack on that on both sides of that ball. And then at number 7, I went Cowboys because this team they're the number 1 scoring offense in the NFC. It's been the best offense in the NFC this year. It just is also one of the worst defenses in the NFC. And I think at least they're better. I don't know if they're great now. I don't know if they're anything better than like a bottom 5 defense in the NFL still, given the state of that secondary. But at least they're better than they were. And they were already pretty close to the 7th best team in the NFC. So I'm going to give them the 7th spot there.
Yeah, I think with the 7th spot, I know for me, the 4 teams there were the Cowboys, the Bears, the Vikings, and the 49ers. And I just think the Cowboys have the most consistent part of any of those 4 teams, which is that offense. You know their offense is going to come to play. With the 49ers, I just don't think they're going to be able to do it this year with all the injuries. They were struggling on defense. even with Bosa and Fred Warner playing, and now they don't have either of those guys. I just don't know if they're going to be able to do it, even when they get their stars back offensively. The Vikings and the Bears are very similar, where like they are so high variance offensively that I just want them to sort of iron out some consistent level of play there. But if I were to choose between the two, I think the Vikings defense has the potential to be a little better than the Bears defense, but I also think the Bears offense has had higher peaks, but also they have similarly low valleys to the Vikings. So it's tough trying to choose between those two.
They just gave up 40 plus to Joe Flacco. Like I couldn't in good conscience with this defense. And like you said, how inconsistent their offense has been. And the Vikings, I still just feel like I don't know who the Vikings are. Especially with JJ McCarthy at quarterback. I'm just like, I don't know who that team is. I almost just want to punt on anytime I talk about the Vikings. I'm like, can I just like have 6 more weeks to talk about the Vikings? I need a little bit more time here to know how good this team is. All right. There you have it. Our trade deadline edition of Pushing the Pile. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back on Thursday previewing all the week 10 slate. Week 10 already. Please like, subscribe, follow our new YouTube channel if you haven't yet. It would really appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, keep pushing.